There are 4 parameters that this watch will measure. Electrodermal response, which is the updated version of galvanic skin response. It is linked to the red side of the nervous system. So over here, when I first talked about the colors and the gas pedal, so the electrodermal aspect of this is linked to the red zone and to accelerations in the nervous system. And then we are able to also get heart rate, and heart rate is going to be also a little bit more advanced because it looks at blood volume pressure, which is literally how much blood flow is going through your capillaries. So it also has a rate and a rhythm to it, and you actually want to see. So when you look at my graph, I'll pass it around, you actually want to see that the blood flow is perfusing in a kind of a nice rhythm like this. And that can also be linked up then to heart rate variability. So that's now the brake side of the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, is the blue side, which is the brake. So we're going to be looking at a measure that taps right directly into the gas pedal, heart rate variability. People that know Stephen Porges' work, he's been talking a lot about vagal tone and that whole side of the nervous system. We want to look at both. A lot of the research that you'll find is even in the biochemical or the physiological research is like cortisol only. That to me is useful, but again, it's too narrow. We really want to look at how does the gas pedal and the brake of the autonomic nervous system work together. Is it turning on? Okay, because I don't know, it went red and I don't know if that means that the battery died.
We haven't logged in yet.
Okay, all right.
This obviously is
Internet
a bit more advanced than Fitbit.
I'm sorry?
Because like Apple Watch or Fitbit, they are coming up with this sort of technology.
This is a very expensive Fitbit.
Yeah.
And it measures now, not just what Fitbit is known for is measuring how many steps, which has an accelerometer on it. So this has an accelerometer on it, so it will tell you the movement of your wrist, and it will tell you how well you do with your sleep cycle. Hey, hi, Mimi. So nice to see you.
So only available for research.
This is available, and you can buy it for $1,700. And it is research quality, and it is what we're going to be using on our diets, on our parent-child diets. So the fourth thing that it measures is temperature. So you get the gas pedal, you get the brake pedal, you get temperature, and you get your movement, which will help us tell about the sleep cycle, and the quality of the sleep.
Are you doing cortisol as well?
We are not doing cortisol. I just use that as an example of people using one side of the nervous system, but not the other, even though cortisol is very popular. So all 4 of these measurements, I don't know if I should press something.
No, I haven't logged in yet. It's still open login, so just
Okay. All right, honey.
wait.
Okay, wait. That's really hard for me to do.
I know. 31 years.
Wait. So what I'll finish up with this is to show you that if this ever gets to work, we'll pass it around. So you'll see my physiological readings live. This will be on, we're starting off our protocol with a 0 to 1 year old, a 1 to 2 year old, a 2 to 3 year old, a 3 to 4 year old, a 4 to 5 year old. So we will have 5 dyads that we'll be tracking. This is starting in Edmonton, Canada. So our 2 infant psychiatrists will be starting our study. And we hope that once we get data from 5 dyads within this age range, that we'll have enough data that we can start to go for official grants. At this point, I'm funding this myself. And so we're hoping that within probably a year and a half, that we would have enough information that we could start applying for grants. But this is now being fed into a phone app. If this gets working, you will see MIT's reading of the data into their app, but we have a special phone app that is IRB safe. It's used already for public health data for large population samples. And so, and my co-PI, who's the system scientist, has done a lot of public health research using phone apps. So he's already very familiar with this. So our phone app now will be sending this data live to our phone app. Once we get the thresholds and the parameters for what each stress response thresholds is for that baby and for that parent, then we will, the phone will buzz them. So it will signal them that their baby or themselves are going into a stress response. There is a drop-down menu that will show up, so they can also tap whether they think they're green, red, blue, or combo. So we're going to get external data because we want to match and see how does external reality of what we observe match with internal reality and what's going on in our bodies. And there'll be a drop-down menu in which they can track what triggers from which brain networks they think that the trigger is coming from and what toolkits they're using for stress recovery. So once we can track actually our baseline of how frequent are these stress responses, how long are they lasting, what's the intensity of them, and if we have a toxic stress pattern, the toxic stress pattern is really how you will get into the study. We're not interested in diagnoses, we're interested in the underlying physiology. So again, along with throwing out the DSM the way NIH has, we are throwing it out and we are saying, we don't care what your diagnostic categories are, we'll keep track of them, but what's most important to us is, are you in a toxic stress pattern? Is this dyad in a toxic stress pattern? And how do we help you get out? Because you will not improve your levels of engagement in terms of step 2 and getting that firing and wiring for that good brain architecture unless you get physiological regulation. So we have to get you out of toxic stress. The toxic stress is a public health crisis. It has been, it is pervasive across multiple diagnostic categories, across multiple cross-cultural immigrant populations, across trauma populations, across our developmental delays and disabilities. It is no respecter of diagnosis nor persons. So this is the forward thinking of our research and where we're going. We did pilot this with someone from an occupational therapist. I said to, I co-chair a conference every spring in Pasadena, and it's part of Perfectum, which Serena and Josh are part of with me, and it's a conference that really focuses on DIR and the floor time model and really honors that, a relationship-based approach to working with developmental delays and disabilities. So we had the good fortune of linking up with a stellar master clinician, DIR specialist, occupational therapist in Boston. We were inviting Rosalind Picard, who's from MIT and the creator of these watches, and so we had her as our public speaker, as our keynote speaker. I said, Tal, are you brave enough to use the watches and do a case with me where we consult together? She said, what if we don't get any good data? What if it's a complete flop? I said, we're taking a big risk. We don't know if it's gonna work or not. But I said, I don't wanna invest in these watches if it's not gonna help us, and if we think it's a flop, then that's gonna give me second thought about my spending money on doing the research. So she was brave, and this child is a 12-year-old child, severely impacted by being autistic and non-speaking, and would communicate a lot through his behaviors, which were red zone behaviors. And lo and behold, we found out that these red zone behaviors where he was aggressive and hitting and being very disruptive to the group that he's a part of the clinic. Tal runs a clinic and a day clinic for these highly impacted kids on the spectrum, was linked directly to his electrodermal skin response going up. So it was actually a stress response, and his, quote, aggressive behavior was directly linked with the fact that his physiology was getting activated. But of course, most of the time, these kids get labeled as having bad behavior and end up in more of a behavioral program, which is looking at lens through the behavioral lens, which is a very narrow way of looking at behaviors, either compliant or non-compliant, and the solution is either reward or punishments. And that is a simple perspective that does not match the messy, complex cases that we work with. So you cannot use simple solutions or simple assessments with messy complexity. So they started to shift. The whole interdisciplinary team that she works with started to shift. And they started to orient his whole day according to these stress responses. There were many other interesting things they found out. At one point when he hit one of his providers, she was behind him and she moved abruptly to his peripheral vision. And he immediately shot up his electrodermal response. We saw that as a threat. He hit her, and it was the fact that the threat was that she'd move quickly from behind him to his peripheral vision, which was a threat response for him. They started having her cycle and circle around, never coming from behind him to the side. He stopped hitting her. So all to say that in the course of 4.5 months, this was the range when he started. His electrodermal skin response was started here. The range was from about 3 to 8.1. And within 4.5 months, this was his average range. It reduced down from 0 to 2.7. And the egregious behaviors substantially reduced. So they built in a rest period right before the afternoon. He started to take naps in the afternoon because they realized he was not getting down to baseline green. And he was tired and fatigued and now going into group, which was overstimulating, and of course, stimulating the stress response. Yes?
Connie, how will you determine this? So a certain degree of stress is physiologically good.
Yes,
So how
it is.
are you going to titrate? Like, what's the kind of sense of titration? Like, what's toxic for you may not be toxic. You know, blah blah
Yeah.
blah.
So what we're going to do is, this is why our phone app is going to have the green, red, blue combo colors. So we're going to test what do we see and observe, and what's showing up physiologically, and at what point does the physiology show that the stress response is there and it's now high enough. So obviously for him, when he was up here in the 4 to 8 range, and we got correlations with that, with hitting and aggression, that we realized that that was a toxic stress response, right? There's probably also going to be cases though where the physiological, what we also saw with him was that sometimes the acceleration was happening before we got the outbreak of the red zone behavior. So we're going to have to individualize what is a threshold for a stress response. And what makes it toxic is not whether it's red or not, or blue or combo. What makes it toxic is the frequency of it, the intensity of it, and the duration of it. So the fact that he was for long periods of time and too frequently going into these red zone episodes, and they were lasting too long, and we also had the aggressive behavior accompanying them, that will tell us what the toxic pattern is. So we're using Bruce McEwen's, the fancy term allostatic load, his 4 toxic patterns and rhythms as our guide.